Talk and Lifestyle. Today we are going to be covering where life meets identity and identity meets life. I've got two incredible guests again today. I will let them introduce themselves, but as you all know, I like to do it unorthodoxly. So I would like to find out what you identify as in terms of race and your sexual identity. Yeah? Should we start with you?
Cool. So my father's part of the Windrush generation and my mother's British. Okay. So I'm mixed race, mixed Afro-Caribbean and European, and I identify as a straight woman.
Straight woman, yeah.
So I'm Jewish on my mother's side. Okay. My dad is Greek, Cypriot and Irish. Mm-hmm. So mix of ethnicities, but all sort of Caucasian, European going on there. And I'm bisexual.
Bisexual. Okay, so you guys haven't met me officially. So I'm Kashan, and I identify myself as heterosexual. I'm mixed. I'm multiple ethnicities. I hate to get into it, but
please do give us the flags.
I have Irish, Scottish, I have Indian, I have Chinese, and Sierra Leone. So that's all my jumbled mix in there.
Perfect.
It's a bit complicated, but it fits in there.
Yeah.
So jump right in. Just covering a few things in terms of what you guys do as professions. So I just kind of wanted to know about what you did as a profession, what you do as a profession.
Yeah, so at the moment I'm a researcher in the House of Commons. I work for the Liberal Democrat Party, sort of putting briefings together and helping with policy areas like the environment and health and social care.
Okay, and you?
So I'm a health education worker for a local authority, working with children and young people by day, and then by night I'm a local councillor in East London.
Okay, so within both of your roles, do you find what you identify yourself as a bit of a struggle? And has there been any complications growing up or in the work?
Well, one thing that I find sort of in and out of work, I wouldn't call it a microaggression because for me it's something that I can understand why people ask it, but I'm a lot fairer than other mixed race girls are. Okay. So there's always a follow-up question to where are you from? Where are you from?
Where are you really from?
Where are you really from? It's no, but where are you really from? Because I don't like your answer, even though
it's not good enough.
I gave you the answer that you were looking for. But I find that most people do generally just kind of, it comes from a place of curiosity, maybe not as tactful as they would have liked it to be. But it's a question that I encounter an awful lot. Yeah.
So if someone asks you, because I know this is a common question I get being mixed, especially with black and white, I always get asked, what do you identify yourself more as, black or white? Do you ever get that question?
You've always got to choose.
Do you ever get that question, being Jewish and having Cypriot and...
Yeah, people often try and get you to pick one because people are boxed in. Everything's binary. They want to see things as A or B and black or white. So if you give them an answer that is too complex, they want to go, no, actually, but let me just box you in here.
What do you see yourself?
You're not going along with what you want us to...
Exactly. You're not playing their game. And I think you got to stay strong and say, well, no, actually, I'm not picking. Yeah, this is my identity. It's who I am. Yeah. That's it.
We don't call pink half red, half white. We call it pink. It's its own established
identity.
It exists on its own behalf. You know? Yeah.
So, in terms of your, let's say, your sexual identity or your gender identity, because I know it's a very complex topic to kind of brush on. In terms of being a bisexual man, do you feel like there's any complications that you necessarily deal with directly?
I think when I was younger, there was probably more complications in terms of me sort of accepting myself and understanding that actually relationships and sexuality isn't this kind of binary, do this or do that thing. And that did take me a few years. I think a lot of people do struggle with that. But nowadays, I'm so relaxed on it because I've spent so many years pressed. You know, if somebody wants to assume that I'm gay or assume that I'm straight, I'm not gonna bother to correct them. I don't have the energy. I'm not interested enough. If I care about you enough and we care about each other enough as a working relationship or a friendship, you're gonna find out.
You feel like to set them a bit straight, hey, honey, this is who I am. You know me, I'm friends with you.
Exactly. But otherwise, if I don't know you, what's the point?
You're not.
You know.
Yeah. And what about you? As a heterosexual woman?
Yeah. So I mean, there are challenges being a woman in the workplace. I think one of the biggest things is the preconditions that come with being a woman.
Yeah.
People expect you to behave a certain way, to want to look a certain way, to want to talk and act and consume culture in a particular way. Yeah. And I think sometimes with women it can be hard or harder being yourself, because you might have interests or pursuits that aren't typically feminine.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we just need to, and a lot of people are working on broadening the definition of feminine to fit with how all women feel. 'Cause all women are feminine. It's just their own kind of way of expressing it.
So would you say you're pro-feminist?
Oh yeah, definitely. I like to think.
Okay, I'm your opposite. I'm like, yeah, I'm very old school. So
How
it's
old
into
school?
That whole like traditional. I should stop saying traditional because I feel like it's such a
loaded
tradition
word.
can be tradition. I think evolves. I think so I should stop saying tradition. I feel like the olden traditions in terms of like the wife kind of stay. I know it's such a stupid thing, but in my mind, like stays at home, looks after the kids, cooks the food, looks cute for her. Like I just generally have that picture in my head. I don't know why. I don't think it's wrong, but I can see why a lot of women don't want to be that box.
So what does feminism mean to you?
For me, I just feel like for me it's more the freedom of not feeling like just because you're a woman, you're conditioned to have to be in that box. That for me is feminism. But I also feel like as a woman, there are roles that I feel like I have to feel based on my culture. So this is based on my own culture. So I feel like as a woman, there's certain things growing up that if you didn't do, it would be really seemed as bad. Like not being able to cook. Like I mean, I'm not embarrassed about it, but I literally learned to cook when I was 16. Like I legitimately learned to cook when I was 16. I moved into my godmom's house and I learned to cook then. So, but before that, I didn't care. So I think, I don't know, just your culture, do you feel like there's conditions in terms of like how you're expected to be within your like family or your immediate family?
Well, I'm an only child, so I have the luxury
Same.
of telling my parents, you raised me this way whenever I do anything I disagree with. I think they know who I am. They have, they've seen me grow up from being a tiny little thing that I can't remember. I find it still very weird that they knew me as a baby. But
How dare they?
How dare yeah. So they've seen the journey that I've gone on, and in some ways they've seen that trajectory before I knew I was heading there. And I think that they have done what they can, and I think they've done an amazing job in preparing me for the life that I wanted to have a shot at.
So what kind of identity in terms of, because in terms of your actual culture, is your culture more British culture? Is your culture more British based, or is it actually both of your parents like input in your actual, like let's say morals, outlooks, aspects of your life that you feel like you're a little bit, you have to be like because of your culture?
I think it was interesting that you brought up tradition actually, because I grew up with a lot of really sort of patriarchal figures in my family on all sides. So whether it was my yaya, who had a very traditional understanding of the world, who would only talk to me in Greek, who would just want me to succeed in the basic ways, as you must get a job, you must find a wife, you must do this. She was never restricting in that way, but that was how she saw the world. And on the other side, it was the influence from my grandfather, who was Jewish and grew up in the 1930s and 40s, so spent quite a lot of his life quite fearful, quite terrified, and fed that into me, and why somebody should be really proud of their Jewish roots and never hide away and never cower. And at the same time, I've got the Greek Orthodox Church. I went to a Church of England primary school. It was a lot of influences, and I grew up in Newham as well in East London. So of course, all of my friends and classmates, people that I spent time with my entire childhood, from immensely diverse backgrounds. It was all kind of people's cultures that I was experiencing, involved in, going to different houses and stuff like that. So I think growing up in London in the 90s and noughties, there is definitely a difference, I think, in how someone experiences their version of British culture. My version of British culture is not perhaps somebody who grew up in the 70s in Newcastle. It's very, very different. It's very multicultural. It's very London-based. It's very urban. And that I think is quite important when we're discussing identity in those terms.
So do you think that, like, with saying, is it your yaya?
Yeah.
That your grandmother?
That's my great auntie.
Your great
Yeah, but it's the same word in Greek for grandmother. Like, yeah.
As like a great aunt?
Mm.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of, like, let's say her traditions, in terms of like you getting a job, getting a wife, and living your life as man and wife, do you feel like being bisexual, does that now complicate things, or is it for you just like not?
I guess again, it was that journey that I went on as a teenager. As a teenager, it was like, that was a thing that I would never be able to talk to my older relatives about. I'd never be able to reveal to different parts of my family who I really was. And for a while it was a struggle, but now I am just so much more relaxed. I do often get a little bit annoyed when it comes to LGBT activism with bi-erasure and the way that bisexual and pansexual people are often ignored or overlooked. And that's a different topic in itself. But currently, no, I don't feel restricted in that way. I think if I went to, my dad's passed away now, but if I went to her children who are my cousins and said, you know, I've got a partner who's a man or I've got a partner who's a woman, they would be indifferent.
Do you think they wouldn't care?
I don't think they would care. I think there'll be a few that did, but...
What about you? Do you feel like, let's say you classify yourself as heterosexual, but do you think if you were the other way, like bisexual, pansexual, any other identity other than heterosexual, do you think that would be a complication for any of your parents?
No, we've actually had this kind of hypothetical discussion. Like, you know, I've casually sort of inferred if I were to have a child who came out, you know, and it sounds ridiculous, but you just want to test, just gauge a reaction. And both my parents were incredibly supportive. They both themselves have very diverse backgrounds, but they have close family members who they're very close to and very fond of who are LGBT. They have figures in the media or in politics who they both really like who are LGBT. And I think in a way I was more sort of prejudiced because I went into that conversation thinking that my parents being older and perhaps more in a way like a particular kind of traditional. So I kind of felt bad that I had to ask them that question. But obviously the answer was one that I wanted to hear. But that I think sort of revealed my prejudice whilst I was trying to look at theirs.
So what about
my father's Jamaican.
Your dad's Jamaican.
Yeah.
So for example, like in my family, because I have mainly like my black side is Caribbean, and a lot of the time as being gay or bisexual or whatever is considered as a no-no. Like I don't know if you ever experienced that, and obviously being like Jewish and, you know, very traditional values, do you feel like that doesn't really, it's not really there in your household, in your family, like within your immediate, so I mean like mum and dad, because obviously you're an only child, so so do you ever feel that pressure from your dad that or his side of the family that if you were, it would be like, oh?
If that were the case, I mean, hypothetically, sure, I'd like to think that my parents would stand up and defend me. I'd like to think that my parents would love me in that situation. My wider family would be supportive. And given that I know certain family members are in same-sex relationships and they're still as loved, as loved, it's a great feeling. And I think people's minds, they may be from other generations, they may not know the word woke, they may not know the terminology to use and the terminology to avoid, but that's just because they don't have access to the same language or linguistic development that we do. So it's they're not saying things because they're hateful, they're just saying things because they don't realise that, oh, that word's out of fashion now.
I think we often don't give the older generation enough credibility.
And it's about educating them, don't you think?
It's a massive part of it, but it's not just for them. Everyone, I think, has to go on some sort of journey.
And they've gone under so much social change in the last few decades. If you're about 80 years old now, it must be quite difficult, if you're aware of it, to keep track of how people identify now. It's a much broader. People have the opportunity to identify in a much wider range than they did.
So then what tips would you now give to a person who is of the older generation and accepting our culture differences? Because I believe this is our culture now. Like this is, you know, being open about our sexuality, being open about, you know, what we identify as race, not just feeling like we have to stick to one and, you know, forget about the other. What advice would you give to the older generation to help them understand us as the younger generation?
I'd say come to the table, break bread, let's have a chat about who we are. That's the only way we can ever do anything, is to treat each other with the respect that, and it doesn't always work, but if you try and come from that place of respect, people should respond to that. Or maybe they're just nasty people.
I think
or close-minded.
Possible.
But you have to, it's a cliche, but you know, you have to, if someone's extending their hand, you have to unclench your fist, I think.
I like that phrase.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on, and hopefully I see you guys around.
Absolutely.
And guys, throw any questions at us anytime, and we can kind of get them out there and, you know, help others.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.